Adding an asset-based approach. O, teka, akala ko ba pagod na tayo maging resilient? We often define a community as a group of people living within a shared space, having shared problems, experiences, and dreams, or sharing the same resources to make a living. But when we talk about community development and we go to the community, we recognize that not everyone thinks the same, struggles similarly, or are treated the same way. With an agenda of empowering the poor and not leaving anyone behind, community organizing calls us to have a clear bias for the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. This is our community. People-centered development compels us to address the political, economic, and social structures that keep the community poor. However, this rationale centered around poverty has its own pitfalls and may inadvertently disempower and prevent the poor from attaining people-centered development. Litaw na litaw itong problema na ito sa mga humanitarian response projects sa pagpili ng mga beneficiaries. Sana hindi na namin inayos agad ang aming bahay pagkatapos ng bagyo. Di sana nabigyan pa kami ng ayuda para dito. Sana hindi na lang ako naging leader sa komunidad. Yung mga pinipili nila para maging beneficiary ay yung mga miyembro lang. But this is also evident in development projects. In one of the projects we supported as an institution, kinamusta ko ang komunidad sa mga CEO. Ang haba ng litanya nila tungkol sa mga problema, sa kawalan ng seguridad sa lupa, sa patuloy na pagsasamantala ng kapangyarihan ng LGU, sa kasakiman ng pamamalakad ng mga nagaharing uri sa merkado. Sabi ko, teka muna, lampas isang dekada na kayong kumikilos dyan . Bakit pareho pa rin ang problema nila? Nasaan ang community development? Di ba mabisa ang inyong ginagawa? Only then did they start sharing the incremental but significant changes in the community. How the community has demonstrated collective action and people empowerment. It is as if partnerships of the community with external institutions can only be rationalized if severe problems are highlighted. Totoo na di nasusolusyonan agad ang mga komplikadong issue. Pero di kaya nakakapagod ito sa punto de vista ng mga leader at ng mga samahan? Nakakadiskurahe na ang dekad-dekadang sama-samang pagkilos ay bumabagsak pa rin sa matingkad na kahirapan? Hindi. Dahil hindi ganito mag-isip at kumilos sa mga may hirap. The poor have long recognized their capacity to become agents of social change. They see themselves as rights holders that demand accountability, but also as active citizens that have shared responsibility over their own development. Buhay na buhay ang hangarin nila patungo sa likas-kayang pag-unlad na makakaangat sa kanila mula sa kahirapan. Baka ang kakulangan ay ang ating pag-unawa at pananaw na nakiikot sa isyu nila. Baka tayo ang nagbibigay diin sa kawalan at kakulangan ng komunidad. Dito natin pinupunuan ang ating pag-unawa sa komunidad gamit ang asset-based approach. The contribution of charity to ease the suffering of the poor has been evident with more intense and frequent disasters and the exposure of the scandal of poverty and inequality. But this focus on inputs and problems, emphasis on the role of the rich, the offensive and undignified portrayal of the poor as victims, have long been criticized as a quick-fix band-aid solution that reinforces patronage politics and perpetuates the disempowerment of the poor. The needs-based approach tried to improve on this by attempting to look at the outcome and addressing the needs of the people. The poor became the objects of development. They were deserving assistance. A semblance of recognizing their voice was done when consultations were mandated to ensure that assistance given to them was relevant to their problems. But such steps forward were far from empowering the poor or promoting sustainable development, kahit na sinasabing para sa SDGs daw ang mga interventions na ito. Participation was limited to consultations and downward accountability was a desired virtue, but not necessarily the standard. The rights-based approach revolutionized our development approaches. The emphasis in both processes and outcomes highlights the participation of the poor in decision making as an essential element of their empowerment. Non-discrimination and equality was promoted as the poor were recognized as rights holders. Accountability was demanded from duty bearers. Development was linked to the universality and indivisibility of human rights. It comes as no surprise that power-hungry politicians attack human rights and offer their charity instead as an alternative. But while the rights-based approach was seen as more sustainable, it did not explicitly highlight the role of the poor as active citizens, the social capital of the marginalized to drive community development, or the capacity of the vulnerable to become agents of change. This is where asset-based approach comes in. The asset-based approach may relatively be new in terms of development frameworks, but the practice has been evident for centuries. Starting from the strengths of small communities, managing limited local resources through collective action have proven to be far more effective and sustainable than large area-based or ecosystem-based approaches. Asset reform, through the development of community natural resources and social capital, have had a generational impact on communities. Competence of local leaders are now based on their capacity to inspire collective action instead of merely bringing in external resources into the community. However, the introduction of asset-based approach cannot be seen as being apart from the rights-based approach. If the focus is merely on asset building and self-help, then we fall into the trap of neoliberalists, where accountability is removed from government and transferred instead to the private sector or even to civil society. Oo, nakakapagod talaga maging resilient kung di kasama ang rights claiming sa ating definisyon ng resiliency. A key element in asset-based approaches is the application of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is an approach that utilizes questions and dialogues to help participants uncover existing strengths, advantages, or opportunities in their communities, organizations, or teams. AI has evolved through the decades as more and more practitioners have innovated and adapted the model. The 5D cycle starts with the definition or clarifying the central topic of the dialogue. The emphasis is on getting the question right to initiate a dialogical process. Define the affirmative topic instead of identifying the problem. When have we been most proud of as a community? Sounds familiar ba? Discovery engages participants in the dialogue. By focusing on key moments and experiences, when we felt most energized, we look for the patterns of values and capacities that have led to our past successes. Dreaming is a visioning process that is grounded in the positive past. The community presents a provocative proposition that is collectively produced by the stories of the people. It bridges the best of what is with our intuition of what might be, as opposed to creative visioning exercises that often lead to disillusion because of lofty ideals. The dream is anchored on recreating the best of people involved in the process. Designing allows the people involved to co-construct the plan or the design for the organization or the community. Again, the emphasis is on participatory and shared planning. The final step is destiny. It was initially called delivering or implementing a change management plan, but the anticipation of innovations and adaptations to create the preferred future was more attuned to the destiny of the community. There are many principles behind the appreciative inquiry. Constructionist principle, wherein words create worlds. Simultaneity principle, wherein inquiry creates change. The poetic principle, wherein we can choose what we study. Anticipatory principle, wherein images of the future inspire our action. And the positive principle, where we recognize that positive questions lead to positive change. What is innovative in appreciative inquiry is that it has redirected our attention from what people do to what people think. It highlighted how problem-based or deficit-based thinking was dragging down our development approaches. There are several versions and iterations of asset-based approaches. The ABCD, or asset-based community development, was born from urban poor settlements. ABCD highlighted the power of stories and the need to identify capacities of communities. Core group organizing was seen as an essential. There was a need to identify capacities, but also to locate where it is. Strengthening social capital was needed to build relationships. Community assets found amongst individuals, community groups, and institutions had to be mobilized. The value of multi-stakeholder platforms for collective visioning and planning was put forward. Mobilizing internal resources was a leverage for the community to access external assistance. The sustainable livelihoods approach was more detailed in identifying community livelihood assets, especially in rural communities, in identifying hazards and vulnerabilities, and in integrating participatory processes and rights-based approach. A separate lecture will be done on sustainable livelihoods approach. Any questions?